An arrogant tycoon tries to humiliate a female employee in front of international investors, but what seemed like just another abuse of power takes an unexpected turn when a child decides to intervene. In front of everyone, the girl reveals an extraordinary talent that dismantles the tycoon's empire of vanity. From that moment on, a wave of transformation begins, and no one in that room leaves the same. If this story interested you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and tell us which city you're watching from. Let's continue. I promise this will be the best story you'll ever hear in your life. The afternoon New York sun reflected off the mirrored facade of the Blackwood Tower, a monolith of glass and steel that rose imposingly on Park Avenue, the financial heart of New York City. On the top floor, Theodore Blackwood contemplated the city from his corporate throne. At 58, the real estate mogul had built a multi-billion-dollar empire, but his true talent lay in making others feel small. "Leo, cancel my meeting with the Japanese. Tell them I had an unavoidable commitment with the governor," he ordered his assistant without taking his eyes off the window. "And send up that new cleaner. The coffee spilled on my Persian rug is still visible." In the lobby of the same building, Elena Ramirez, 42, was finishing cleaning the marble counters. She wore the grey uniform of the outsourced cleaning company and carried in her eyes the weariness of someone who had woken up at 4 in the morning. "Mom, I finished organizing the magazines in the waiting." "Harriet," said Eleanor, her 12-year-old daughter, approaching with a worn paperback in her hands. "Put that away, Ellie. If the supervisor sees you reading on the clock, I'll lose my job," Elena whispered nervously. "You should be at school already. I only brought you because your teacher was out sick." Eleanor tucked the book, a basic Mandarin handbook, into the pocket of her frayed coat. She was thin, with curly hair tied back in a ponytail, and lively eyes that seemed to absorb everything around her. "Mrs. Ramirez," called the secretary, "Mr. Blackwood requests your presence in the penthouse, immediately." Elena turned, pale. "It must be about that coffee I spilled yesterday. Ellie, you stay down here, be quiet." "No, Mom." "I'm going with you," the girl insisted, holding her mother's hand. "I'm not going to let anyone yell at you again." The panoramic elevator ascended swiftly, revealing the megalopolis that stretched to the horizon. Eleanor watched, fascinated, while her mother took deep breaths, trying to control her nervousness. On the 52nd floor, the doors opened to a different world. Authentic Persian rugs, contemporary art, Italian furniture. Theodore's office was larger than the 2-room apartment where they lived in the Bronx. "Mr. Blackwood, the cleaner, is here," announced the assistant. Theodore turned slowly in his leather armchair. He was tall, with perfectly trimmed grey hair and a tailored Italian suit. His cold gaze swept over Elena, pausing with visible irritation on Eleanor. "I don't recall requesting the presence of a child," he said with disdain. "I'm sorry, sir. My daughter is out of school today and—" "Spare me your personal difficulties," Theodore interrupted. "I have a situation that requires immediate attention and you are responsible. Look at this." He pointed to an almost imperceptible stain on the rug under his desk. "Do you know how much this rug costs? More than your annual salary. And now it's ruined by your incompetence." Elena lowered her head. "I'll clean it right away, sir. Do you really think a simple cleaning will fix it? This rug was hand-woven by Persian artisans. It's a work of art." Theodore stood up, circling the desk like a predator. "But what would someone like you understand about art, right? How much schooling did you have? Did you even finish middle school?" Eleanor watched the scene, her fists clenched, a growing indignation in her eyes. "Besides," Theodore continued, suddenly turning to the girl, "why aren't you in school, girl? Planning to follow in your mother's footsteps, cleaning up other people's messes?" At that moment, the elevator opened again, and 5 Japanese executives entered, accompanied by translators. Theodore smiled, his demeanor transforming instantly. "Ah, my esteemed partners from Tokyo, what a pleasure to welcome you to our humble office," he said in flawless English. "I was just resolving a small domestic issue." Elena tried to move away discreetly with Eleanor, but Theodore stopped her. "Wait, we're not finished." He turned to the visitors. "Gentlemen, while my assistant prepares the conference room, allow me to show you something interesting." He walked to a safe built into the wall entered the code and removed a carved wooden box. From inside, with white gloves, he extracted an ancient scroll protected by an acrylic case. This document was found during the excavations for our new tower in the Port District of New Orleans. According to experts, it's a 17th century manuscript, possibly related to a Jesuit treasure. Theodore displayed the item like a trophy. Unfortunately, it's written in a combination of languages that none of my translators have been able to fully decipher. A true historical relic. The Japanese men approached, curious. One of them, an older man, adjusted his glasses and observed the scroll intently. "Fascinating," he commented in hesitant English. "It seems to contain elements of Latin, but also Eastern characters." "Exactly," exclaimed Theodore. "I've hired the best linguists in the country, but the content remains a mystery. I suspect it might contain the location of valuable historical artifacts. Imagine the prestige our company would gain from making such a discovery." During the conversation, Eleanor had slowly approached, drawn by the scroll. Her eyes scanned the lines of the document with intensity. "Gentlemen, this is the reality of America," Theodore continued, gesturing toward Eleanor and Eleanor. "We have so much cultural potential, but the population lacks basic education. This girl can probably barely read English, let alone decipher historical documents." He laughed at his own joke, expecting the Japanese to join in. The silence that followed was broken by an unexpected voice. "The document is written in 5 different languages, Mr. Blackwood," Eleanor said, without taking her eyes off the scroll. "The base is ecclesiastical Latin with notes in ancient Mandarin, a few phrases in Choctaw, characters in Sanskrit, and a passage in classical." "Arabic?" All eyes turned to the girl. Theodore frowned, annoyed by the interruption. "Girl, don't be impertinent. This is a business meeting, not a history lesson." "Forgive my daughter, sir," Elena intervened, pulling Eleanor by the arm. "We'll leave now." But the older Japanese executive made a gesture, stopping them. "Wait, let the girl speak." He turned to Eleanor with a gentle smile. "How do you know this, little one?" Eleanor hesitated, looking at her mother, who gave a slight, resigned nod. I like to study languages, sir. I go to the Mott Haven Public Library every day after school. They have a foreign language section and books on ancient writing." Theodore rolled his eyes. "Gentlemen, I apologize for the inconvenience. This child clearly has a vivid imagination. Now, if you'll allow me—" "Which part of the text can you read?" the Japanese man asked, ignoring Theodore. Eleanor took a deep breath. "I can try to translate some parts, if you'll permit me, sir." The American businessman felt control of the situation slipping from his hands. His face began to turn red, a vein throbbing in his temple. "This is ridiculous. Playtime is over. You two out of my office now." The oldest of the Japanese men adjusted his glasses again, staring at Theodore with severity. "Mr. Blackwood, your hospitality leaves much to be desired. We came to America not just for business, but to learn about its culture and its people. This young lady seems to have something valuable to contribute." Cornered and aware of the potential deal at stake, Theodore forced a smile. "Of course, Mr. Tanaka. I'm just concerned about your precious time." "Time is never wasted when one learns something new," the Japanese man replied. He turned to Eleanor and, with a solemn gesture, invited her to approach the scroll. "Please show us what you can read." The room fell into absolute silence as Eleanor approached the scroll. All eyes were fixed on the 12-year-old girl, the cleaner's daughter, who now stood before a document that renowned experts had failed to decipher. Elena nervously wrung her hands, torn between pride and fear. She knew her daughter's talent with languages, but she never imagined it would be exposed this way in such a hostile environment. Theodore Blackwood, for his part, maintained a sarcastic smile, waiting for the moment he could further ridicule the impertinent girl. "May I touch it?" Eleanor asked in a surprisingly firm voice. Theodore was about to refuse, but Mr. Tanaka nodded. "Of course, little one." With delicate gestures, the girl adjusted the scroll under the light. Her eyes moved along the lines as if dancing among the symbols. After a few seconds of concentration, she began to speak. This initial part is in Latin. It says, "Ad gloriam maiorem Dei et societatis Iesu." It means, For the greater glory of God and the society of Jesus. It's the motto of the Jesuits. Theodore snorted, impatient. Any basic history student knows that. It's not, and it continues, Eleanor went on as if she hadn't been interrupted. Hoc documento continet verum thesaurem, non aurum sed sapientiam. In English, this document contains a true treasure, not of gold, but of wisdom. The Japanese executives exchanged impressed glances. Eleanor now pointed to different characters on the side of the scroll. Here, in ancient Mandarin, it is written, "Knowledge that transcends borders illuminates the darkness of closed hearts." And this part in Sanskrit speaks of the true wealth that cannot be stolen nor destroyed, for it resides within the human being. Mr. Tanaka smiled, visibly charmed. Extraordinary. And the Arabic text? Eleanor hesitated for a moment, her fingers hovering over the elegant curved characters. He who rises through his own merit and humility truly knows the power that comes from God. She paused and added, there are also small notes in Choctaw in the margins, probably added later, which speak of the land without evil, an important spiritual concept for the indigenous peoples. One of the translators accompanying the Japanese delegation approached, incredulous. He examined the document and looked at Eleanor with admiration. How can such a young child, he began, but didn't finish the sentence. Theodore felt his face burning. What should have been a demonstration of his power and cultural refinement had turned into a public humiliation. He tried to regain control. Very well. An interesting presentation. Now, if you'll permit us, we have important matters to discuss. He motioned for Elena to remove her daughter, but Mr. Tanaka seemed unwilling to drop the subject. Young Eleanor, where did you learn so many languages? The girl looked at her mother, who nodded shyly, encouraging her to speak. At the Mott Haven Public Library, sir. They have a language program for underprivileged kids, with volunteers who are immigrants or children of immigrants. I study there every day after school. I've learned 9 languages already, some better than others. 9 languages? Theodore repeated, incredulous. That's absurd. Which languages do you speak? Asked Tanaka, ignoring the American. English, Spanish, French, Italian, basic German, intermediate Mandarin, basic Arabic, and now I'm starting Japanese, Eleanor replied. And I can read a little Latin and ancient Greek, but I don't speak them. A respectful silence filled the room. Even Theodore's assistant had stopped typing on his tablet, hypnotized by the unusual scene. Impressive, said Tanaka, bowing his head slightly in a gesture of respect. And how old are you? 12 years old, sir. And how did you manage to learn so much in so little time? Eleanor shrugged, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. I like to listen to people talk. We have a lot of immigrant neighbors in our community. Syrians, Chinese, Bolivians, Haitians. They teach me, and I help their kids with their English lessons. At this moment, Elena gathered the courage to speak. My daughter has always been like this since she was little. She used to find books in the recycling bins, where I used to work. At 5, she could read better than many adults in our neighborhood. The school principal even wanted to skip her a grade, but I didn't let her. A child needs to have a childhood. The cleaner's simple, direct words seemed to amplify Eleanor's achievement even more. One of the younger Japanese executives asked Tanaka something in Japanese, and he translated, "My colleague asks if you have ever been to Japan." "No, sir," Eleanor replied. "I've never left New York, but I have a friend, Takeshi, who is the grandson of Japanese immigrants. He lends me manga and teaches me some words." Then, to everyone's surprise, she bowed and said a few sentences in basic Japanese, but with surprisingly good pronunciation. The Japanese group smiled, visibly impressed. Tanaka turned to Theodore, who remained stunned, his arrogance momentarily silenced by the unexpected demonstration. "Mr. Blackwood, you possess a treasure in your building, but it is not this scroll." He gestured toward Eleanor. "This young lady represents the true potential of America, talent that flourishes even in the most adverse circumstances." Theodore swallowed hard, aware that any arrogant response now would only worsen his image in front of the potential Japanese investors. He forced a smile and tried to appear magnanimous. It's true, our inner-city communities often reveal surprising talents. The comment sounded hollow and false. One of the Japanese executives whispered something to Tanaka, who nodded gravely. "Mr. Blackwood, we would like to postpone our meeting until tomorrow. I have some reflections to make about our potential investment." Theodore paled. That deal represented millions of dollars for his new real estate venture. "But Mr. Tanaka, everything is prepared. The contracts, the presentations. Business is like planting crops, Mr. Blackwood. It needs the right time to flourish." Tanaka turned to Eleanor and her mother. "It was a pleasure to meet you. Eleanor, your intelligence and dedication are admirable." After the Japanese left, the office suddenly seemed too large, too empty. The silence was as heavy as lead. Theodore stared at the scroll, then at Eleanor and Elena, his face a mask of conflicting emotions. Humiliation was giving way to something more complex, perhaps, just perhaps, a spark of reluctant admiration. "You may leave," he finally said, his voice devoid of its usual arrogance. "Excuse us, sir," Elena murmured, pulling Eleanor toward the elevator. When the doors closed, she hugged her daughter tightly. "Oh, my daughter, I don't know whether to be proud or worried. The man was humiliated, but now I'm afraid I'll lose my job." "I'm sorry, Mum. I shouldn't have spoken up." "No, dear. You did the right thing. I'm the one who's always been afraid. Afraid of losing my job, afraid of not paying the rent, afraid to dream." Eleanor wiped away a tear. "Your grandmother always said that people like us can't afford to have a voice. But you're different, Ellie." On the ground floor, they were surprised by Theodore's assistant, who had taken another elevator and was waiting for them. "Ladies, Mr. Blackwood requests that you return tomorrow at 9 a.m. It's extremely important." "But am I going to be fired?" Elena asked, squeezing her daughter's hand. "I don't have that information. Just please be here." He handed a card to Eleanor. "For you. Mr. Tanaka asked me to give it to you." When the assistant walked away, Eleanor read the card. It was an invitation to visit the Japanese company's New York headquarters, with a handwritten note in Japanese. "Knowledge is the key that opens all doors." That night, in their small apartment in the South Bronx, Eleanor couldn't sleep. Through the window, she could see the city lights in the distance, including the skyscrapers of Fifth Avenue. It seemed like another world, so close geographically, yet so distant in opportunity. "What do you think he wants, Mum?" she asked for the third time, as Elena prepared their lunchboxes for the next day. "I don't know, honey, but whatever it is, we'll face it together. You taught me today that we shouldn't bow our heads." Elena watched her daughter with a mixture of pride and apprehension. Eleanor had always been different. She absorbed knowledge like a sponge, asked questions even the teachers couldn't answer, saw connections where others saw only chaos. From a very young age, she showed an insatiable curiosity about the world. "Remember when you were 5 and you found that encyclopedia in the recycling?" Elena asked, smiling at the memory. "You wouldn't let go of that book, not even to sleep." "I remember. It had pictures of the planets and the human body. And you memorized it all in a week. Your preschool teacher thought I was teaching you at home." Elena laughed, "as if I had the time or knowledge for that." Eleanor hugged her mother. "You taught me the most important thing, Mum, to never give up." "That's right, honey. And tomorrow, whatever that man wants, we'll remember that." The next morning, as they re-entered the imposing Blackwood Tower, something felt different. The security guards, who usually barely noticed them, now greeted them respectfully. Theodore's personal assistant was waiting for them in the lobby. "Good morning. Mr. Blackwood is eager to see you." In the elevator, Elena adjusted her worn uniform and tried to fix her hair in the reflection of the metal doors. Eleanor held tightly to her school backpack, filled with her language books. When the elevator doors opened on the top floor, Eleanor and Elena found a different Theodore Blackwood from the day before. The businessman was standing, looking out the panoramic window, his hands clasped behind his back. Hearing the elevator, he turned slowly. "Good morning," he said with a formality that surprised both mother and daughter. "Thank you for coming on time." The office seemed brighter. The curtains were fully open. allowing natural light to flood the room. The scroll that had caused so much commotion the day before was carefully displayed on the desk. "Please have a seat." He indicated 2 leather armchairs in front of his desk, the same ones where he normally received executives and important politicians. Elena hesitated, uncomfortable with the situation. "Mr. Blackwood, if this is about yesterday, my daughter didn't—" "This is not a reprimand," Theodore interrupted. "Quite the contrary." He sat down, studying them with a different gaze, devoid of his usual arrogance. "I received a call from Mr. Tanaka this morning. The Japanese group has decided to invest in our project on one condition." He paused, observing their reactions. "What condition?" asked Eleanor. "Direct, as always. That a portion of the profits be allocated to an educational program for talented young people from underprivileged communities. They were impressed with you, Eleanor." Elena squeezed her daughter's hand, incredulous. Theodore continued, "Initially, I admit I was annoyed. I don't like having conditions dictated in my business deals." He cleared his throat, visibly uncomfortable. "But then I reflected on what happened. I spent the night researching autodidacts and alternative education. I discovered remarkable stories of people who, like you, Eleanor, overcame adverse circumstances to acquire knowledge." The businessman stood up again, pacing the room as he spoke. "The question is what to do with this realization. Ignore it and carry on as before, or—" He stopped, facing them. "Or turn it into something productive." Eleanor held the man's gaze, while Eleanor remained apprehensive. "I have a proposal for you," Theodore announced. "I want to create a scholarship program for talented young people from the inner city, starting with you, Eleanor." "Scholarships?" Elena repeated, confused. "Yes. Full funding for studies in excellent private schools, language courses, international exchanges. Everything necessary to develop talents like your daughters." Eleanor frowned, suspicious. "And what do you get out of this?" Theodore smiled, surprised by the girl's astuteness. "A legitimate question. In the short term, I close a multi-million-dollar deal with the Japanese. In the long term, let's just say it's an investment in the country's future." He paused. "And perhaps a way to compensate for years of indifference." The ensuing silence was broken by Eleanor. "And my job? Will I continue cleaning?" "No, Mrs. Ramirez. I have other plans for you. I want you to lead this educational program. No one is better suited than a mother who raised a brilliant daughter, despite all the difficulties, to identify and nurture new talent." Eleanor's eyes widened. "But I only have a high school diploma. I don't know anything about administration or education." "You will receive all the necessary training," Theodore assured her. "What's important is your life experience and your sensitivity. The rest can be learned." Suspicion still hung in the air. After being treated as invisible for so long, this sudden proposal seemed too unreal. "Why should we believe you?" Eleanor questioned. "Just yesterday, you were humiliating my mother over a rug." Theodore sighed deeply, seemingly ashamed. "You have every right to question me, Eleanor. My behavior yesterday was inexcusable." He sat down again, leaning forward. "I've spent my life measuring people by what they have, not by who they are. Yesterday you showed me just how limited that worldview was." He stood, walked to a bookshelf, and took out a book. "Do you know this author? Paulo Freire?" Eleanor nodded. "I read Pedagogy of the Oppressed at the library. I didn't understand all of it, but I liked the idea that education can set people free." Theodore seemed genuinely surprised. "Exactly. This book has been on my shelf for years, more as a decoration than anything else. Last night, for the first time, I actually read it." He returned the book to the shelf. "And I realized how much human potential I've wasted around me." He turned to them, with a more human expression than Elena had ever seen on her boss. "I don't expect you to forgive or trust me immediately. That's why I want to start with concrete actions." He pressed a button on his phone. "Leo, bring in the documents, please." The assistant entered with a folder and handed it to Theodore, who opened it on the desk. "This is a contract establishing the New Horizons program. I am initially allocating $10 million to fund scholarships for 100 talented young people from inner-city communities. He slid the documents toward Eleanor. You will be the executive director, with a salary commensurate with the position and the autonomy to build your team. Elena took the papers with trembling hands. Is this for real? Absolutely. There is also a specific addendum for Eleanor, guaranteeing her complete educational path, including university in the US or abroad should she so choose. Eleanor examined the documents carefully, while her mother struggled to comprehend the magnitude of this sudden change in their lives. I suggest you take the contracts to a lawyer for review, Theodore continued. I don't want you to have any doubts about my intentions. And when would this start? Elena asked. Immediately. I've already requested that an entire floor in this building be adapted to house the program. In 2 weeks, we can begin selecting the first scholarship recipients. Eleanor, who had remained silent analyzing the situation, finally spoke. And the scroll? What does it really say? Theodore smiled. You translated most of it yesterday, but there's a passage you didn't mention, at the bottom. He pointed to the document. Can you read it? The girl approached the scroll again. This part is in an old variation of Spanish and Portuguese mixed with Latin. She studied the text for a few moments. It says something like, "True power lies not in subjugating others, but in elevating them. He who rises by treading on his fellow man builds a throne on quicksand." Theodore nodded slowly. It took me almost 60 years and a 12-year-old girl to understand that. He looked at Eleanor with genuine respect. You taught me more in 5 minutes than many advisors have in years. The following weeks were a revolution in the lives of Elena and Eleanor. They moved to a spacious apartment on the Upper East Side, closer to Elena's work and Eleanor's new school, the prestigious Dalton School. The mother, once a cleaner, now occupied an office on the 48th floor of the Blackwood Tower, with assistants and a team of educators at her disposal. The transition wasn't easy. Elena faced suspicious glances from the building's executives and veiled comments about her capabilities. Some suggested she was just a figurehead to please foreign investors. Eleanor, in turn, felt out of place among her. New classmates who were mostly children of New York's elite, but both had a resilience forged in adversity. Elena immersed herself in her studies, taking night classes in administration and social management. Eleanor quickly excelled academically, but maintained her simple habits and her connection to her old community. Theodore Blackwood was also transforming. He surprised everyone by announcing he would take a Mandarin course, taught by a Chinese teacher who lived in Flushing, Queens. Twice a week, the powerful businessman sat in a small community room, side by side with immigrants and workers, learning the rudiments of a new language. One Saturday afternoon, 3 months after that fateful meeting in his office, Theodore invited Eleanor for coffee at a bookstore in Greenwich Village. "How are you adjusting to the new school?" he asked, as he watched the girl flip through a book of French poetry. "It's different," Eleanor replied. "They have so many resources, incredible labs, a huge library, but sometimes I miss the Mott Haven Public Library. It was more real there." Theodore nodded, understanding. "I get it. Our roots are important." He hesitated for a moment. "I've been visiting some of these public libraries in the last few weeks. I wanted to better understand what makes these places so special for people like you." "And did you understand?" "I'm beginning to. They are places of transformation, where ordinary people find tools to reinvent themselves." Theodore's phone rang. He answered briefly, his expression changing to one of concern. "Is something wrong?" Eleanor asked when he hung up. "Yes, some troubling news." Theodore put his phone away, thoughtful. "The Mott Haven Public Library, where you used to study. It's been included in a city program for repurposing public spaces. In other words, it's slated to be closed to make way for an administrative center." Eleanor paled. "They can't do that. That library is essential for hundreds of children and adults in the area. Many have nowhere else to study or access books. Unfortunately, it seems the decision is all but made. Unless what?" Theodore smiled, a different glint in his eye. Unless the community mobilizes, and perhaps with some strategic support, they could reverse this situation. Can we do that? Could the New Horizons program help? The program has its limits as a private initiative, but you, Eleanor, you have a powerful voice, a story that needs to be told. Me? The girl asked, surprised. I'm just a student. You are so much more than that. You are living proof of what a public library can do for society. Theodore closed the book in Eleanor's hands, and I have a feeling this will be your next great lesson, and mine as well, learning to fight for what truly matters. At that moment, the seed of a new challenge was planted. What neither of them could imagine was how this battle would test the sincerity of Theodore's transformation and catapult Eleanor into a role that would change not only the history of that library, but the lives of many people in New York City. The Mott Haven Public Library was an old building constructed in the 1950s with an Art Deco facade and large windows that allowed generous amounts of natural light to enter. For decades, it had served as a quiet refuge for students, researchers, and residents seeking knowledge, escapism, or simply a peaceful place amid the chaos of the metropolis. Now, a yellow banner stretched across its entrance. Building undergoing reappropriation. Future site of regional administrative headquarters. It was a rainy Tuesday when Eleanor gathered the courage to return there after weeks in her new world of privilege. She walked under an umbrella, observing the changes in the neighborhood she once traversed daily. She felt a pang of guilt for having so easily drifted away from the place that had been her sanctuary. Upon entering the library, she was greeted by the characteristic silence, broken only by the rustling of pages and the soft typing on the few available computers. Mrs. Clark, the head librarian with white hair and glasses perched on her nose, smiled upon recognizing her. "Eleanor, what a pleasant surprise! We heard the news that your mother told us." The woman approached, hugging her warmly. "We are all so proud of you." "Thank you, Mrs. Clark. I've missed this place." Eleanor looked around, noticing some boxes stacked in a corner. "Is it true they're closing the library?" The librarian's face darkened. "Unfortunately, yes. We received the notice 2 weeks ago. We have 2 months to vacate the building." She sighed deeply. "They say they'll transfer the collection to the central library, but we know what that means. Most of the books will end up boxed in some warehouse, and the patrons from here can't afford to travel all the way downtown. But that's terrible. We can't let that happen. We've started petitions, sent letters to City Hall, but—" Mrs. Clark gestured, resigned. "The mayor is adamant. The project has already been approved by the city council. This land is too valuable to be just a library, in the words of the urban planning commissioner." At that moment, a man approached. It was Henry Mendez, a retired literature professor who ran a volunteer book club on Thursday afternoons. "Eleanor, it's good to see you." He greeted her with a firm handshake. "We were just talking about organizing a protest, but we were missing someone who could bring visibility to the cause." "Me?" Eleanor asked, surprised. "Yes, you. Your story is inspiring, young lady. A girl from the Bronx who learned 9 languages by frequenting a public library. If the press knew about this—" Eleanor thought for a moment. "Maybe we can do more than just a protest. I have an idea, but I'll need help." In the following days, a coordinated operation took shape. Eleanor mobilized her old school friends, the volunteers from the language program, the library's regular patrons, and even her new classmates from the private school. Elena and Theodore offered logistical and strategic support, turning what would have been an isolated protest into an organized movement. The plan consisted of a peaceful cultural sit-in. For 24 uninterrupted hours, the library would host readings in various languages, educational workshops, musical performances, and testimonials about how the space had transformed lives. Everything would be live-streamed on social media, aiming to sway public opinion. On the eve of the event, while preparing posters and organizing the schedule at Mrs. Clark's house, Eleanor received an unexpected call. "Good afternoon, Eleanor. This is Richard Alvarez from the Municipal Department of Cultural Affairs." The voice on the other end sounded tense. I understand you're organizing an event at the Mott Haven Library tomorrow. Yes, sir. A peaceful cultural demonstration. I see. Well, as a representative of the city, I must inform you that any unauthorized occupation of the building will be considered trespassing. We will have to call the city police if necessary. Eleanor felt a chill. Mr. Alvarez, it's a public library. We are simply exercising our right to use it while it's still open. There will be no vandalism, only cultural activities. Even so, we cannot permit it. The building is in the process of administrative transition. After hanging up, Eleanor immediately called Theodore, reporting the veiled threat. Don't worry, the businessman reassured her. We expected resistance. I have a few contacts at City Hall who might help smooth things over. Continue with the preparations. What Eleanor didn't know was that, at that very moment, Theodore was facing his own dilemma. In his office, he was meeting with 3 important investors, including the owner of the construction company that had won the bid for the new administrative center that would replace the library. Theodore, let's be direct, said Charles Mendoza, CEO of Progress Construction. Your involvement in this protest against the library's closure caught us by surprise. We have partnerships on 3 major developments. This could affect our business relationship. Theodore maintained his composure, though his heart was racing. 3 months ago, he wouldn't have hesitated to abandon any cause that threatened his business. But now, something had changed. Gentlemen, I'm not directly involved in the protest. I simply support the cause of education in general. We know that your new protégée, the former cleaner's daughter, is leading the movement, another executive interjected. And your social program is providing logistical support. That puts us on opposite sides, Theodore. And what about that plot in Hudson Yards? Asked the third man. Can we still close the deal next week? Or will your new social priorities interfere? It was a clear ultimatum. The Hudson Yards property represented one of the biggest deals of the year for the Blackwood Group, with a potential profit of hundreds of millions. Theodore felt the weight of the choice he had to make. The Hudson Yards deal will proceed as planned, he replied cautiously. As for the library, I believe there's room for dialogue. Perhaps we can find a solution that works for everyone. The men exchanged skeptical glances. The meeting ended with tense handshakes and promises of future discussions. When he was alone, Theodore looked out the window, contemplating the city he had helped shape. For decades he had seen New York only as a real estate chessboard. Now he was beginning to see it as a living organism, with needs that went beyond concrete and steel. His phone rang. It was Elena. Good afternoon, Theodore. I just heard that the protest organizers are being pressured. Eleanor is worried. Yes, I heard. I'm trying to mediate the situation. He paused. Eleanor, I need to be honest. My involvement in this cause could negatively affect some important business deals. I understand. Her voice sounded distant. So you're backing down? The question hung in the air like a silent accusation. I didn't say that. I'm just evaluating the implications. You know, Theodore, when you proposed that scholarship program, I kept wondering if it was genuine or just a marketing strategy. Elena spoke with an unusual frankness. Now we're facing the first real test. Theodore felt the weight of her words. It's not that simple. Actually, it is either we believe that education and culture are priorities, or they're just pretty words to impress Japanese investors. Her voice grew firm. Either way, Eleanor and I will be there tomorrow, with or without your support. The call ended, leaving Theodore with a whirlwind of thoughts. On his desk, 2 documents seemed to compete for his attention. On one side, the preliminary contract for the Hudson Yards deal. On the other, the detailed program for the library protest. The next day, the Mott Haven Public Library awoke transformed. Colorful banners decorated the facade with messages like, "Books save lives," and "Knowledge can't be closed." Inside, dozens of volunteers organized the space for the scheduled activities. Eleanor, wearing a T-shirt with the phrase 9 languages, 1 public library, coordinated a team of young people preparing the live stream. Her mother, Eleanor, spoke with journalists who were beginning to arrive, drawn by the unusual story of the child prodigy from the Bronx. At 10 a.m., the event officially opened with a multilingual reading circle. Children and adults took turns reading excerpts from books in English, Spanish, French, Arabic, Mandarin, Japanese, German, and Italian. The performance, simple yet powerful, captured the attention of the media present. "What we see here," Eleanor explained to a reporter from PBS, "is proof that public libraries are more than just book repositories. They are bridges between worlds, opportunities for those who can't afford private education." The number of participants grew with each hour, exceeding expectations. Local artists, university professors, writers, and even some opposition city council members showed up to demonstrate support. Social media was buzzing with the hashtag #ChowSaveTheLibrary, as videos of the demonstration spread rapidly. Around 2 p.m., tension rose when 3 city police cars parked in front of the building. An officer approached, requesting to speak with the organizers. "We have orders to shut down this unauthorized demonstration," he informed Mrs. Clark and Eleanor. "It's not a demonstration, sir," Eleanor replied calmly. "It's a cultural program inside a library that is still in regular operation. Even so, we need you to vacate the premises by 4 p.m. The news spread quickly among those present, causing apprehension. Some began to gather their belongings, fearing a confrontation. It was at this critical moment that a black car pulled up near the police cars. Theodore Blackwood got out, accompanied by a man in a suit, whom everyone immediately recognized, the mayor of New York City. A stunned silence fell over the crowd as Mayor Michael Reed walked through the library doors. A middle-aged man known for his inflexible, technocratic stance, he rarely appeared at popular demonstrations without prior notice. Beside him, Theodore Blackwood walked with a serene expression, though his eyes betrayed the tension of the moment. Eleanor and Eleanor exchanged surprised glances. What was Theodore doing with the mayor? Had he switched sides? "Ladies and gentlemen," the mayor began as microphones and cameras turned in his direction, "I came to personally verify this situation." His tone was studiously neutral, like someone measuring every word. "I understand the concern of this library's patrons, but administrative decisions must follow technical, not emotional, criteria." Murmurs of discontent rippled through the hall. Mrs. Clark, the head librarian, stepped forward. "Mr. Mayor, this is not an emotional issue, but one of the right to education and culture. This library serves over 2,000 people monthly, most of whom have no alternative access to books and knowledge." "I understand," the mayor replied, "but the new regional administrative center will benefit an even larger number of citizens by centralizing services that are currently scattered across various neighborhoods." At that moment, Theodore Blackwood asked to speak. All eyes turned to him, including Eleanor's, who watched him with a mix of hope and apprehension. "Mayor Reed, citizens of New York," he began, his firm voice echoing in the room. "I have spent the last 24 hours reflecting deeply on this situation. As a real estate developer, I have always championed urban development. But true development cannot come at the expense of access to education and culture." A wave of applause erupted, but Theodore gestured for silence. "Therefore, I would like to propose an alternative solution. The Blackwood Group owns a plot of land on Grand Concourse, just half a mile from here, with a similar footprint and better access to public transportation. I am formally offering this land to the city, at no cost, for the construction of the administrative center, on the condition that this library not only remains open, but receives the revitalization it deserves." The buzz in the library immediately grew louder. The mayor, visibly surprised, adjusted his tie, buying time to process the unexpected proposal. "Mr. Blackwood, your offer is unusual," he finally responded. "It would need to be evaluated by our technical and legal teams." "Naturally," Theodore agreed. "The preliminary documents are ready for review." He took a folder from his jacket and handed it to the mayor. "I've also included a technical feasibility study conducted by an independent consulting firm, demonstrating that the proposed land meets all the requirements for the administrative center, with additional advantages in terms of accessibility." Elena watched the scene in astonishment. Was this the same Theodore Blackwood who just 4 months ago had humiliated her and her daughter over a stain on a rug? The mayor quickly leafed through the documents, his, expression shifting between surprise and political calculation. The media recorded every moment, aware they were witnessing something extraordinary. "Mr. Mayor," Eleanor interjected, stepping forward. Her voice, though young, sounded clear and confident. "May I say something?" There was a moment of hesitation, but in front of the cameras the politician nodded with a forced smile. "My name is Eleanor Ramirez. I'm 12 years old, and I learned 9 languages by coming to this library." She paused, letting the information sink in. "I was born and raised in the Bronx. My mother worked 3 cleaning jobs to support us. We didn't have money for books or private tutors, but we had this library." The girl looked around, her eyes scanning the shelves full of books that had been her teachers and companions. "How many other children like me are there in New York, Mr. Mayor? Children who just need a chance, a door open to knowledge. This building isn't just concrete and brick. It's a promise that even those born without privilege can dream, can study, can learn." A respectful silence filled the room. Theodore watched Eleanor with evident pride. Eleanor fought back tears. "The decision is yours, Mr. Mayor," Eleanor concluded. "But remember, administrative buildings organize paperwork. Libraries transform lives." Enthusiastic applause filled the hall. Camera flashes went off, capturing the powerful image, a 12-year-old girl from a humble background, confronting authorities in defense of knowledge. The mayor, an experienced politician, immediately recognized the symbolic power of the moment. His aide whispered something in his ear, likely warning him about the impact on opinion polls. "Well," he said finally, "given this generous proposal from Mr. Blackwood and the evident popular support for this library, I commit to suspending the reappropriation process and seriously evaluating the alternative presented." More applause. The mayor raised his hands, asking for silence. "I will form a special commission, including community representatives, to study the feasibility of the proposal in detail and make a final decision in 30 days. It wasn't a complete victory, but it represented a major shift in perspective. Where there had once been a definitive death sentence, there was now a concrete possibility of salvation. While the mayor gave interviews to the press, presenting himself as a politician open to dialogue, Eleanor, and Theodore gathered in a corner of the library. "Did you know he was coming?" Eleanor asked the businessman. "I invited him," Theodore confirmed. "After our conversation yesterday, I realized we needed a more direct solution. Michael Reed and I have known each other for decades. Let's just say he owes me a few favors." Elena studied him with a new look. "The land on Grand Concourse, isn't that the one you were planning to use for the luxury residential complex?" Theodore nodded. "Exactly. The Blackwood Sky Gardens project, a $300 million development." "And you gave it up for this library?" An enigmatic smile appeared on the businessman's lips. "Let's just say I re-evaluated my investment priorities. Some things can't be measured in figures alone." News of the protest at the Mott Haven Library and Theodore Blackwood's surprising proposal spread rapidly through the city. Major newspapers and television news programs highlighted the case, while social media buzzed with divided opinions. Many celebrated the preservation of the cultural space, while others questioned the true motives behind the billionaire's seemingly altruistic gesture. For Eleanor, however, the biggest surprise came 2 days later when a TV producer contacted her, inviting her to appear on a national talk show. They wanted to know more about the girl with 9 languages who had challenged authorities in defense of education. "I don't know if I should accept," she confessed to Elena as she helped her mother prepare dinner in their new apartment. "I don't like being in the spotlight like this." "It's your decision, honey," Elena replied, chopping vegetables. "But think about how your story could inspire other kids in the same situation you were in." The phone rang again. It was Henry Mendez, the retired professor who coordinated the book club at the library. "Eleanor, you won't believe this," he said, his voice overflowing with enthusiasm. "After all the media coverage, we've been receiving book donations from all over the country. Publishing houses are sending entire collections. Companies are offering new computers. It's incredible." In the following days, The library transformed into a symbol of cultural resistance. Volunteers showed up daily to help catalogue the donated books, organize workshops, and renovate the physical space. The movement that began as an attempt to save a specific building had expanded into a broader discussion about the role of public libraries in an unequal society. Theodore Blackwood, meanwhile, was facing the consequences of his choice. The broken business deals with Progress Construction resulted in a significant drop in the Blackwood Group's stock. Some board members resigned, protesting what they called irresponsible philanthropy. Long-standing business partners began to distance themselves, fearing the businessman was losing his business acumen. On a rainy afternoon, Theodore called an extraordinary meeting in his office. Present were Eleanor, now the executive director of the New Horizons program, Eleanor, and a small team of loyal advisors. "The situation is challenging," he admitted, looking at the chart showing the decline in his company's stock value. "But not unexpected. I knew there would be resistance when we decided to change our approach." "Do you regret it?" Eleanor asked directly. Theodore smiled. "Not at all. For the first time in decades, I feel like I'm building something that truly matters." He stood up, walking to the window that offered a panoramic view of the city. "I've spent my life erecting towers of glass and concrete. Now I want to build opportunities." Elena, who had developed remarkable administrative competence in recent months, presented some documents. The New Horizons program is already supporting 78 students with full scholarships. The preliminary results are impressive, with significant improvement in academic performance. She flipped through another report. As for the library, the Special Commission seems inclined to accept the alternative land proposal, especially after the pressure from the media and public opinion. Eleanor listened intently, absorbing every detail. In the last few months, she had matured extraordinarily. In addition to continuing her formal studies and language learning, she had begun to develop an interest in public policy and social transformation. "That's good," she commented, "but we need to think beyond a single library. What about the dozens of other public libraries in the city that are also under threat, and the community cultural centers, and the public schools with no basic infrastructure?" Theodore observed her with admiration. "Always one step ahead, aren't you, Eleanor? Do you have an idea in mind?" The girl hesitated for a moment, then answered firmly, "Yes. I think we need to document all of this. Not just the story of our library, but what it represents in the larger context of public education in America." She paused, organizing her thoughts. "Maybe a book. Not a political manifesto, but something that tells real stories of how public spaces of knowledge transform lives." Eleanor looked at her daughter with surprise and pride. "A book? You want to write a book?" "Yes, Mum. And I want to start by interviewing people whose lives were transformed by libraries, by dedicated teachers, by social projects. I want to show that I'm not an exception. I'm just someone who had access to opportunities that should be everyone's right." Theodore nodded slowly, an idea taking shape in his mind. "You know, Eleanor, this could be more than a book. It could be the beginning of a national movement for the appreciation of public spaces for education and culture." "Exactly," the girl exclaimed, her eyes shining with enthusiasm. "And we could use the resources of the New Horizons program to expand this impact, create a support network for community libraries across the country." The meeting continued with renewed energy as new ideas emerged. What had begun as a corporate crisis analysis transformed into the planning of an ambitious social impact project. At the end of the day, after everyone had left, Theodore remained in his office, contemplating the city as it slowly darkened. He remembered who he was just 4 months ago, a man obsessed with power and status, unable to see value beyond the numbers in his bank account. His phone rang. It was Charles Mendoza, CEO of Progress Construction and a former business partner. "Theodore, we need to talk," said the grave voice on the other end of the line. "Things are getting complicated for you in the market. There are rumors they're preparing a hostile takeover bid for the Blackwood Group." "I see," Theodore replied calmly. "It was predictable. You can still reverse this. Back out of the land donation, cut that social program in half, show them you're still a businessman." There was a significant pause. Finally, Theodore responded, "Thank you for the warning, Charles, but I'd rather face a hostile takeover than betray what I now believe in." He hung up the phone, surprised by his own tranquility. The threat was real and potentially devastating to his financial empire. Yet, for the first time in his life, Theodore Blackwood felt truly at peace with his choices. A year had passed since that first confrontation in Theodore Blackwood's office. New York City continued its frantic routine, indifferent to the small revolutions happening within it. However, for Eleanor, and Theodore himself, the world would never be the same. The Mott Haven Public Library had not only been saved, but transformed into a model integrated cultural center. After the city approved Theodore's proposal, the space underwent a complete renovation, with an expanded collection, modern computers, and an entire wing dedicated to language learning, now named the Eleanor Ramirez Wing, to the young woman's embarrassment and pride. Even more significant was the chain reaction that a single saved library had generated. Inspired by the case, residents of other neighborhoods had mobilized to defend their own threatened cultural spaces. A network of solidarity had formed, connecting community libraries, independent cultural centers, and public schools in a movement for the appreciation of accessible education. At the center of this movement, almost accidentally, was Eleanor. At 13, the girl who once frequented libraries to escape the harsh reality of her neighborhood had become a national symbol of cultural resistance. Her book, The Power of Listening, written over 6 months with the support of an experienced editor, had surpassed all expectations. It wasn't a political manifesto or a conventional autobiography, but a collection of real stories, including her own, about how public spaces of knowledge had transformed lives across America. On a Saturday morning, the Barnes & Noble in Midtown was packed for the official book launch. The line for autographs stretched throughout the store, a mix of people of all ages, social classes, and backgrounds. "I never imagined so many people would be interested in what I have to say," Eleanor commented to her mother as they prepared for the event. Eleanor, elegant in a navy blue suit, a far cry from the grey cleaner's uniform she wore a year ago, gently fixed her daughter's hair. "Your book touches on something universal, honey. The search for knowledge, the importance of opportunities. That resonates with people, no matter where they come from." The signing was a success, with journalists from various outlets covering the event. Eleanor, now more comfortable in the spotlight, answered questions with the same mix of wisdom and simplicity that had made her known. "No, I don't consider myself exceptional," she replied to a reporter who asked about her talent with languages. "I had access to resources that should be the right of all children, books, dedicated teachers, a space to study. My story shouldn't be extraordinary. It should be common." At the end of the event, as the crowd began to disperse, Eleanor noticed an elderly man waiting discreetly in a corner of the bookstore. It was Mr. Tanaka, the Japanese executive whose visit had triggered this whole transformation a year ago. "Miss Eleanor," he greeted her with a respectful bow, "your book is wonderful, a work of rare wisdom for someone so young." "Thank you, Mr. Tanaka," Eleanor replied, moved by the reunion. "You were a fundamental part of this story." "Merely an attentive observer," the Japanese man smiled. "I came to New York for a business meeting, but I couldn't miss this launch." He paused significantly. "Did you know your book will be published in Japan next month? It's already being translated." The news took Eleanor by surprise. "In Japan? But how?" "The world needs stories like yours, Eleanor. Stories of transformation, of dignity, of how knowledge can be the greatest force for change." He handed her a small package. "A gift. Books of classical Japanese poetry for your language collection." Meanwhile, on the other side of the city, Theodore Blackwood was facing the biggest challenge of his business career. In a boardroom on the top floor of his building, the extraordinary shareholders' meeting that would decide the future of the Blackwood Group was underway. The hostile takeover attempt, announced 3 months earlier, had materialized. A consortium of investors, led by former partners disgruntled with the company's new, socially responsible direction, had offered to buy a majority of the shares, seizing control. "The numbers speak for themselves," argued Richard Torres, the group's spokesman. Since Mr. Blackwood began his philanthropic projects, the stock value has dropped 15%. The diversion of resources to social initiatives with no tangible return harms all investors. Theodore listened attentively, showing no signs of unease. Beside him, a small team of loyal executives awaited his response. When he finally took the floor, his voice was firm and serene, very different from the imperious tone he used to use in business meetings of the past. "Ladies and gentlemen shareholders," he began, "I appreciate your concern for the group's financial performance. Indeed, our shares have suffered a temporary devaluation, but I would like to draw your attention to other indicators." He gestured, and his assistant projected a series of charts onto the large screen. "Since implementing our new social responsibility policies, our market reputation has improved significantly. The consumer confidence index in our brands has increased by 32%. New international partners, especially from Europe and Asia, have shown interest in joint ventures solely because of our commitment to sustainable and inclusive development." Some shareholders exchanged skeptical glances, while others seemed to reconsider their positions. "More importantly," Theodore continued, "we are building long-term value. Investments in education and culture are not merely philanthropic, they are strategic. We are shaping the next generation of skilled professionals, conscious consumers, and engaged citizens." Richard Torres interrupted. "A nice speech, Theodore, but this isn't a rally. We're talking about business, and your social projects are bleeding the company dry." Theodore smiled serenely. "I understand your perspective, Richard. That's why I've prepared a proposal." His assistant distributed folders with documents among those present. "As you can see, I am willing to personally buy all the shares of investors dissatisfied with the group's new direction at a 10% premium over the current value. I will use my personal assets for this. Those who share our long-term vision are welcome to stay." A murmur went through the room. The offer was unexpected and generous, a risky move that few businessmen would dare to make. "This is not an ultimatum," Theodore clarified. "It is a solution that respects both those seeking immediate financial return and those who believe, as I do, that business can and should be an instrument of social transformation." The meeting stretched on for hours with heated debates and intense negotiations. In the end, although Theodore managed to maintain majority control of the company, the cost was immense. He had to invest a large part of his personal fortune to buy back the shares. When the room finally emptied, leaving only him and his closest assistant, Theodore collapsed into his chair, exhausted. "It was worth it, Leo," he murmured, more to himself than to the assistant. "Are you sure about that, sir?" the young man questioned. "You've just committed half of your personal wealth." Theodore smiled with a serenity that would have been unthinkable for the arrogant businessman of a year ago. "Money was always my measure of success, Leo. I accumulated more than I could spend in 10 lifetimes. But now—" He paused, contemplating the city through the panoramic window. "Now I understand that true wealth lies in the impact we have on the lives of others." That same afternoon, in a cafe in the West Village, Eleanor, Elena, and Theodore met to celebrate both the success of the book and the victory at the shareholders' meeting. It was a casual gathering, far from the ostentatious luxury that once characterized the businessman's life. "So, Mandarin student," Eleanor teased with a smile, "how are the classes in the community?" Theodore laughed, running a hand through his hair, now grayer and less perfectly coiffed. "Slow, but steady. I managed to introduce myself properly in the last class, which is progress." He paused. "Professor Li Mei said I have a good ear for tones, whatever that means." "It means you're learning to truly listen," Eleanor explained. "It's the first and most important step to learning any language, and perhaps to understanding any person." Eleanor observed the interaction between her daughter and this man who, a year ago, had been the symbol of everything she despised: arrogance, privilege, insensitivity. Now he was almost like a member of the family, an eccentric uncle still learning the basic rules of social interaction. "How is the New Horizons program?" Theodore asked Elena. "Growing more than we expected," she replied with pride. "We have 212 scholarship recipients now, and we've just partnered with 3 universities that will offer spots for our students when they finish high school. And the House of Words, he asked, referring to the new name of the former Mott Haven Library, now transformed into an integrated cultural complex. Packed every day, Elena smiled, especially after we implemented the free meal program. Many kids can now study without worrying about being hungry. The conversation flowed naturally, interspersed with plans for the future and reflections on the journey they had taken. At one point, Eleanor took a manila envelope from her backpack. "I have a surprise for you both," she announced. "I received this morning." Inside the envelope was an official letter from the Department of Education, inviting Eleanor to join a special commission dedicated to reshaping national policies for public libraries and community cultural spaces. "They want to use the House of Words as a model for a national program," the teenager explained, barely containing her excitement. "They envision creating similar centers in underserved communities all across America." Theodore and Elena read the letter, impressed not only by the invitation, but by the impact that a local action was generating on a national scale. "Did you accept?" Theodore asked. "I haven't responded yet. I wanted to consult with you first." Elena hugged her daughter. "Of course you should accept, honey. Your voice is important in this conversation." "But I'm only 13, Eleanor hesitated. "Will they take me seriously?" Theodore smiled. "Eleanor, you've stood up to an arrogant businessman, deciphered a document in 5 different languages, mobilized an entire community to save a library, and written a best-selling book. I think your age is the least of their worries." The 3 of them laughed, united by a camaraderie that transcended their very different origins. As he watched Eleanor and Elena talking excitedly about the next steps, Theodore reflected on his own journey. For decades he had built an empire based on concrete, glass and numbers in bank accounts. Now he understood that a true legacy was not in skyscrapers or fortunes, but in transformed lives, in opportunities created, in doors opened for those who once saw only walls. The sun began to set over New York, painting the sky in orange hues. At the table of that unpretentious cafe, 3 unlikely people shared not just plans, but a renewed vision of the world. A world where the value of each individual was not measured by their possessions, but by their capacity to contribute, to learn, to transform. "You know what impresses me most about all this?" Theodore reflected, watching the city through the cafe window. "How one small encounter can trigger such a profound transformation. If you 2 hadn't walked into my office that day..." "If you hadn't spilled coffee on his Persian rug, Mom," Eleanor joked. "If the Japanese hadn't arrived at that exact moment," Eleanor added. "If the mysterious document hadn't been there to be deciphered," Theodore continued. "I guess it proves that we never know when or how life can change completely," Eleanor concluded, with a wisdom that belied her age. That's why it's so important to be open to listening, really listening to what the other person has to say. The power of listening. Theodore quoted the title of Eleanor's book. "I spent my life talking, ordering, demanding, and it was only when I learned to listen that I truly began to live." Eleanor, who had faced all sorts of humiliations and hardships in her life, now commanded an educational program with a multi-million-dollar budget and influenced public policy. Her voice, once ignored, was now respected in boardrooms and government offices. Eleanor, the girl who dreamed of escaping reality through books, had become a catalyst for real change, inspiring young people across the country to believe in the transformative power of knowledge. And Theodore Blackwood, the tycoon who measured value in figures, had discovered that true wealth lay in contributing to a more just and accessible world. When they said their goodbyes that night, each heading home, they carried the certainty that they had found something more valuable than any treasure described in ancient scrolls, the understanding that human dignity is the most precious asset, and education its most powerful ally. In the city that never sleeps, where social contrasts paint a mosaic of inequality, a small, quiet revolution continued its course, reminding everyone that true power lies not in building walls, but in building bridges, not in accumulating, but in sharing, not in speaking louder, but in learning to listen. End of story. Dear listeners, We hope the story of Eleanor, Elena, and Theodore has touched your hearts. The journey of this extraordinary girl who transformed an entire city with her intelligence and determination reminds us of the power each of us possesses to change realities. If you were moved by this narrative of transformation and human dignity, be sure to subscribe to our channel and share it with those who need to believe in the power of education. Leave a like and comment on which part touched your heart the most. Every day we bring you inspiring stories that explore the complexity of life and the human potential to overcome challenges. Follow our work and discover new narratives that will stir your emotions and expand your horizons. We look forward to reading your comments.